Welcome to Coleman Report Live. Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. In the house, Sean Murray, great to have you. First time chief editor, founder of deBanked, the alt lending newsletter information source guide for small business loan brokers. Sean, so good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Really happy to be here.
Sean, you've been I've been tracking you. You've done a great job. You've been doing this for 15 years now.
That's right. Yeah, quite a while.
We're having you on to talk about Kris Roglieri. You and I both have been involved in his event since he founded it. But give a quick background on what you do. And let's see, University of Delaware. That's cool. I like that. Widely known for extensive reporting on alt lending. And what else does deBanked offer that is of interest to our audience of small business lenders?
Yeah, so we have a heavy focus on the alternative finance space, as you mentioned, particularly with small business. That includes revenue-based financing, MCA, working capital. We put out newsletters, as you mentioned. We have a website, and we also do events. So we have conferences that we typically do 3 per year, and we focus on the lender, funder, and broker aspect of the industry.
Very good. I know you have one coming up in New York. If you're a lender, great way to make some contacts with some loan brokers and check that out. Also, sign up for his newsletter. The daily is free, correct, Sean?
That is correct. It's free to subscribe.
There you go. All right, let's get into this. How long have you known Kris Roglieri?
So, I wouldn't say that I know him well by any stretch of the imagination. I know him really because of the NACLB was my introduction to him. In fact, I believe you and I even spoke about it recently. Right. In that we were on a panel together way back when.
We were on a panel. We were on a panel. That's right.
We were on a panel.
Go ahead.
Yeah, all the way back in 2016. And I guess I had encountered Kris shortly before that. We had some overlap in audience, just in terms of commercial lending was sort of coming up against small business lending and finance, and so he had invited me to come to that event and sort of speak for the working capital and MCA side of the space, which at that time was not that popular with that audience, but nevertheless, that was my introduction to it, and that's where I first met him.
I made the statement that Kris Roglieri positioned himself as the speaker of the loan brokers in this industry, as the person leading it. Comment on that. Was I wrong?
So I think it's debatable. I noticed that you had made that comment. I think what has happened is that we have the industry, the wider industry has sort of drilled down into narrow silos, right, where you each have your own sort of leadership and a community built around it. It's hard to say that he was specifically the face of the entire business loan broker industry, but he certainly was a very visible and very well-known person in it, 100%.
See, you like how I did that. I made that statement and I got some pushback on it, so I cleverly made you answer it to say, no, Bob, you're not quite right, but I'm going to let you off the hook, so good job. But let me ask you this. How much of this is obviously a huge story. Delaney's going to talk about it. She's been doing a great job covering it, and talk about it, I think, a little bit more today. But tell me, how of a negative impact is this going to be for the loan brokers out there who specialize not only in alt lending, but also in small business and SBA loan broker referrals?
It's going to have a tremendous negative impact, and that's the unfortunate part of the whole thing.
Right.
Over at deBanked, we're pretty dialed into what's happening at the national and state level in terms of regulation and legislation. It's something that I have to hear about and think about a lot. And I'm not so sure that he may have been thinking about those implications in the way that he, I guess, conducted certain aspects of himself. Right now, just in the mainstream media, there are certain narratives that are trying to be developed about certain aspects of finance, including business lending. You can find any number of negative stories in business lending, commercial, small business, what have you. And it doesn't help when you have someone who's so visible end up in a situation that he's currently in. because it can be used to create a further narrative about anyone who's within that ecosystem. So I think it has a lot of negative implications, unfortunately.
Loan agents, loan brokers have always had a difficult time with SBA. SBA has been burned. Lenders have been burned bluntly by rogue loan brokers. I've always felt that was unfair. I'm sure you feel the same way, because you can be jeopardized by a rogue loan agent as much as a rogue banker. But what do you see going forward? And I love how you mentioned legislation in SBA. Is this a blip, or are there going to be institutional changes that are going to be coming to the relationship between the broker and the lender?
Well, I think at this point, we're not entirely sure how this one particular situation is even going to play out. It's in the early stages of whatever is going on. But there's already been movement at the federal and state level to institute some type of changes anyway, right? Yeah. So that was automatically happening no matter what. Nobody can escape it. There are disclosure laws that are coming out. There's the CFPB with the Section 1071 that everyone's up in arms about. And so I feel like it could have the potential to accelerate some of what's already happening, but it's yet to be determined the scale of the impact, because it's just too early to tell.
Do me a favor. Give me a CFB 1071 101. What are you talking about?
It's a reporting thing at the end of the day. You have to get certain information about the borrowers or about the applicants. You have to record it in a certain way that potentially underwriting doesn't know certain background details of the applicant, right? It could be gender, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. And then you have to report that information to the CFPB. Now, ultimately, it was sort of spun as just a way for the government to be able to have access to data it otherwise wouldn't have had. It was supposed to be a reporting thing. But I think the fear that's building is not only is it costly to have to deal with that, but also how will this data be used from a regulatory enforcement standpoint? And it's my understanding that regulators, particularly the CFPB, is already thinking about ways they can use it to bring some type of enforcement action. So that's what the Section 1071 is to me.
And this has been this came out of the Great Recession. This was a huge push by Senator Warren. One of the emphases on formatting or establishing the CFPB. So it is a hot topic and is one that we will continue to follow. Sean, are you surprised by Kris's alleged actions?
So as someone who was not particularly close to him at all, like I said, by any stretch of the imagination, we weren't friends. I knew him because of his name in the industry and the things he's a part of. He's pretty well known. Typically, if someone is doing bad things, word kind of gets around. I never had any particular reason to go and poke around and see, what kind of bad things, potentially or allegedly bad things, he might be up to, right? Usually, if you know someone is bad but you don't have the proof, you kind of go looking for it. I never thought to look into anything that he was doing. I never felt the need to be interested in his personal or business affairs, because the business model that he had, it seemed like it makes sense. And he has a lot of, I guess, important people who are in his circle and support him. So it took me a while to process it once the headlines hit the news.
That is a great observation, because I'm with you 100%. When you hear, you always, when these things come out, i.e. Carriegi, BankServe, we heard rumors for years about problems at BankServe. BLX, and go back 15, 20 years with BLX, we heard things. But you're right, I never heard any negative feedback or any negative rumors about Kris and about prime lending, prime capital. And the event that he did, you and I were there when he first started with a couple hundred people. Last year, I was unable to attend, but he was pushing 2,000 people. So he was making a tremendous impact and a tremendous good on getting capital to Main Street by getting these brokers who are out there beating the bushes for transactions with the lender who will fund those type of deals. Great observation, Sean. What are you working on? What are you working on with him, or what do you see as the next shoe that's going to fall?
Well, I'm not really.
Putting you on the spot.
All I can tell you that I'm paying close attention to the way that it's all playing out. I rely on the court docket for a lot of my information. I don't like to go off of hearsay or anonymous sources and so forth. I think there have been some developments in some of the cases, particularly the bankruptcy one, that it sheds some light as to what's going to happen next. I have some personal opinions on it. I just think that I think it's a big story. I don't think it's nothing. Some people have tried to minimize it. Oh, it's nothing. It's a big misunderstanding. It's way beyond a big misunderstanding, and I think that people should be paying attention to all the little details that's happening in it.
No, I agree with you 100%. Hey, Sean, stick around for the rest of the show. We're going to do our Fraud Friday segment with Delaney. Delaney, respond to what Sean had to say. What do you think about his comments?
Goodness, well, I'm so glad to have heard it from you. It was very interesting. I look forward to reading more of your reporting. You've been on top of this the entire time.
Very much so. Well, I will tell you what we're working on is we were talking to some former employees. And we as you, I won't go anonymous sources, Sean. I don't believe in that. And I've given them a forum, and we'll vet them and make sure we're going to do that. But if that checks out, love to have. They're more than willing to tell their side of the story on how that affects them personally. It's sad, and I agree with you, Sean, that it is a big story, and it will affect permanently the relationship. And here I'm talking SBA, between loan brokers and SBA. This has been on SBA's radar for years. I'm talking 20 plus years, and this will push them to, I believe, formalize something. With that, Delaney, let's go to Fraud Friday. What do you got for us?
Well, I'd like to start off on a positive note. We see plenty of fraud here. So I wanted to honor the work that the Department of Justice and all of the various organizations and entities have been doing. Here, they announced that in the last year, they have resolved 270 False Claims Act matters related to the Paycheck Protection Program. And as a result, they've been able to recover $48.3 million in connection to them. And this is just with the False Claims Act issues related to PPP.
Yeah. Very good.
Now that we talked about the positive thing, here's some possibly less positive stories here. Wavy Curtis Shane, or Curtin, he recently was sentenced to more than 9 years for a multi-million fraud scheme. Now, when you read this, it doesn't really perhaps make sense at first. He got a $431,000 PPP loan. He defrauded a few financial institutions by refinancing property without the knowledge or approval of the buyer or seller. They were completely unaware of the interaction or the transactions. And he was also purchasing real estate under other people's names without their knowledge or permission. But what led to such a big sentence was that he was a repeat offender just 3 years now, 2021. He was sentenced for mail fraud. He had to pay more than $63,000 in restitution and fines and got 2 years in prison. And then even further back in 2009, he got almost 5 years in prison for bank fraud and wire fraud. According to the 2021 reporting, he owed $1.8 million in restitution for the 2009 case, and he had only repaid about $13,000 at the time.
Well, paid something. I see you have vehicles. Well, go back a slide in. What type of vehicles are we talking about?
Yeah, he has a few properties. I believe these would all be in Kentucky. And then he had a Range Rover, a red Lexus convertible, a Cadillac, and a BMW. So they're going to be trying to get some of that money back that he took.
Sean, we always like to detail what these people do with frauds, and cars have been a number one source of expenses. I can safely say we will never have another. The bar has been set with Mr. Roglieri and his car collection, but we can still talk about him. So, and also, is this gentleman who made the quote on how to get money, or is that the next case?
You know what, Bob, you may be more aware than me. My research might be failing here. I don't recall a quote, but
there was someone who, I believe actually it came from you, and you said that he told someone, well, how you get money is you just have to, do a little fraud and you get money. Anyway, tell us about the next story.
Here we have a duo, but there seems to be one kind of head of this fraud conspiracy. Teldra and Foster, they were convicted of bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud and wire fraud, false statements to a federally insured financial institution, and money laundering. The fraud scheme here was he applied for 14 different PPP loans with different companies, and each of these loans were seeking the exact same amount of money, about $800,000. Each of them said they had approximately 60 employees and approximately $300,000 in average monthly payroll expenses to support these applications. He had doctored the payroll figures, false IRS Form 941s, and, well, it's safe to say he got caught. And Miss Carla Jackson here was convicted for one of these PPP loans.
Sean, I know the alt finance industry has been very sensitive on fraud and borrower fraud. What's the current trend that they're seeing out there from borrowers to merchant cash advances and those types of transactions?
Well, my understanding is that fraud continues to persist.
Yeah.
It has not gone down. There's been plenty of technological advances to weed people out, but they just invent new ways to get around the new technology. And so it is a constant problem. And I think it's the most overlooked problem, particularly when it comes to the cost of the capital that they charge. Right. A lot of the unsecured small business lenders and the MCA folks who charge quite a bit of money compared to maybe a regular bank loan. A lot of that is due to fraud, and they don't get the same treatment that a bank might get when they get defrauded. It's not bank fraud. It's just the cost of doing business, right? Yeah. And so it's the constant problem that they have to face.
Well, very good. Let's see. We have a new webinar that we're doing in a couple weeks on Lance Sexton is doing solving very difficult 7A servicing issues, including what to do when it hits 30 days. It's been popular in the past, and we're going to be offering that on March 14th. So take advantage of that. Sean, and Loomis has updated their data through December 31st. And take a look at that. Sean, I really appreciate you stopping by. Please, let's get you back later on as more things develop. I appreciate your insights, and that was excellent. I really appreciate that. Delaney, good job as always. Thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Delaney.